Hi, I'm Colin.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Drew.
We're the Gamesmiths, and we just got done playing Sovereign State, so we're going to give you a little feedback. So as we started in the end of the game, we started our discussion a little early, like right off the bat,
We did.
saying it kind of seems like White's a little favored in this, and the end game seems like White is going to have control over what happens and where to put the resources. So if you don't work together early game, it's a pretty obvious conclusion that White's going to win, especially having this being our second time through this and like White winning again. With only two extra put in the central government, we pretty much tried to work together the whole time, and
Right.
it's a futile effort.
Yeah, it seems like
So unbalance.
any attempt, I think any attempt for either red or blue to win at all is enough to kind of tip the game in White's favor. Which is going to, I know we discussed in our last video, that this does, I think this does a pretty good job of putting into mechanics, what you're trying to do here and trying to illustrate the balancing of resources between all of these different things. But I think there are also some things that maybe you're saying unintentionally or you're doing unintentionally that, like, on repeated playthroughs kind of send a different message, and that I see on repeated playthroughs, like, send a different message and also, almost discourage additional playthroughs. One was what Colin was talking about, was it seems like if you put anything, if you're red and blue and you try to do anything but just get along with the other person and stop White's going to win. Which means
There's
every time, right,
deviation.
Yeah, every time you sit down and play this game, it's going to be the same. Either red and blue, just like either we're going to get along or not, and you might as well just say that at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then go for it, because there even becomes a point where it's not fun to even, like, at the last minute betray your teammate and try and steal the central government, because you'll just lose. Like, there's almost no way. It's very difficult for red or blue to win. Like, we're either going to work together or we're going to lose, which is a fine message, but really is just going to discourage any, because if it's every time they work together they win and every time they don't work together in the slightest they lose, then as soon as you figure that out, you don't want to play the game anymore. And then also we were running into some frustrations with the border that we started touching on. I think Drew can expand on that a little bit more.
It seemed really powerful where White was getting cards that all three players could draw, that advanced them from the border to those random sectors of government. And that's so powerful, because the border, it's like a storage area for those resources. So as long as like, the more
they're detained, and they're automatically just out of being detained when we worked really hard to make sure that didn't happen.
Right,
then
like, the more we block, which seems like a reasonable goal to have, to block as many as possible, block 2 per turn. The more we block, the more resources they have. When those cards come up, he can always put the 2 that he needs into education or economy or whatever.
And eventually, like, it's the math just works out that the invaders are going to be coming from this area. They're always going to dump over. So the math is that the blue and red run out before the white does.
Right.
And then the white kind of has the pickings of where they want to put their stuff. So at that point, what I noticed is that, well, all we could do was play our card. We didn't have any kind of say. If it's a play card, it's just advancing stuff, and we don't have any say about what happens. We just get to kind of do the math. That's why I took so long on my last turn, because I was doing the math on how can we not lose, and I couldn't. I knew at that point that we lost, because I could see he only needed 2 more over there, and now, even if I put all my resources over there, based on how many numbers, you can just do the math on the table and say, I lost. That wasn't a fun or exciting conclusion to this kind of war we're having with this other country or whatever hell's going on. And it was kind of disappointed when we did try to work together until like a little bit, but even the two resources wouldn't have mattered really. He gets to make the decisions on where he's dumping his stuff based on what's weakest. So you have to either like always distribute.
Because I go last.
Yeah,
he gets, I get to see where the
not
the
only he
holes
goes
are.
last, but he has all the resources at the end that if you hold up the border, it's just gonna eventually it only delays the inevitable. And
Right.
if you're having a border
and-
and working at 20, there should be a point where you win for having a border that's impenetrable or like it relies on cards to get things through. Like
Right.
Yeah, that was definitely something I thought was super odd that we got to 20 and that didn't
two were still
that
You
going
didn't get a
off.
bonus or
that
anything.
didn't feel like any kind of victory. It felt like great, now we become weaker.
Right.
Like, because the only thing that could happen would become for us to become weaker. whether
Unless
through-
somehow
whether through
something went
cards.
through and got forced through
Well, there's
like
no.
to
There's just
education.
you
so-
guys have a cap of 20, and you have to be 10 higher than me, and I don't have a cap of 10, which means once you're at 20 and I'm at 10, there's no way to make the border strong. So that disincentivizes investing a lot in the border. There's also the two major problems I see with this on our replay, at least like mechanically and just with what you're trying to do. If this is kind of the argument you're trying to put forward, or if you're trying to kind of teach a lesson through this game, the two kind of mechanical issues I see are one, the immigrants are always illegal and they're always they're always like invaders. You said that the focus on this game is to deal with illegal immigration, but there's nothing in here that shows like legal immigration or pathways to citizenship, which I think could be interesting and I think is almost what your cards are doing here. That if your cards here would take people, instead of taking people from the border and putting them in here as a penalty, take them from here and put them in as a positive side for the nation. That these are two immigrants
been
that came
brought
across the
back.
border to help in education. These are two educators from another country that are helping us. So that would make more sense for these cards, because what these cards are saying right now is the people you've already detained at the border, you've determined that they're illegal and you've detained them or arrested them somehow, are now just being let in.
They're just escaping.
They're just escaping and they're becoming a bigger problem. And that goes hand in hand with the second issue with the game, which is I think that the best strategy for this game would be to completely ignore the border. Because what the border does is
It
enable these
saps-
cards.
yeah.
Well, because then these cards will randomly pull back stuff from here into sectors that they may or may not want. So the nation would be wiser to invest its resources directly in education than putting it in the border and having those so if white is trying to take over education, the nation has two options: strengthen the border or strengthen education. And if they strengthen the border, these cards could take people that are caught at the border and put them into education. So now, if I had no one detained in here and I drew a card that said take two white people and put them in education, that white card would be wasted and I would get nothing. And if they have someone if health and welfare isn't under attack at all, but they get a card that says pull two people off the border and put it in health and welfare, now they've taken two resources that they wanted to protect the border, are now forced to be in health and welfare, which maybe have zero white people in them at all.
I noticed that.
And so now it is the way you have set this game up is the worst way to spend your resources is on the border. That anybody who plays this game 2 or 3 times will quickly find out the worst way to play this game is to put your resources on the border. The best way would be to work together to make sure that all of these are at a point where white can never take them over. In that case, white only gets 3 resources per turn and never gets bonuses from here. And the nation gets 6 resources per turn and never gets penalties from here.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the best
exactly
way
right.
to win this game, is
exactly
to
right.
completely ignore border security and that is not the stated goal of your game. So I would consider, you know, these cards just kind of mess too much with the border. And I think, like I said, I think it could be made a little bit more interesting if there were a way to convert, you know, have the immigrants become productive members of society instead of all of them always being a burden. That opens more interesting game mechanics. And it even will let you use, even if you did exactly what you're doing now almost, except made any of these cards that pulled white resources from the border into the country work for the country. Because then that incentivizes them to set up a border security, and it more illustrates a border security that is attempting to stop illegal immigration and encourage the legal immigration in ways that are helping the country, as opposed to what you have now, which says all immigration is illegal and all immigrants are bad, and putting money towards the border is a waste of time. Because that's what I think we got out of this playthrough, right?
Yeah.
Like, watch our first video, we definitely got a different thing where our first impression was, hey, we have to work together to keep a functioning nation. But this second playthrough, they did, work together, and Drew even at the end is like, okay, I'm just going to pull stuff out of central government. I will lose the game to blue in order to make sure the nation wins. And that still wasn't enough for the nation to win.
And I couldn't do anything.
Right. So now, and in the first game, we did not put much attention to the border. In this game, we did, and we had the same resources. When you got down to the end of it, only, we said so in the gameplay video, when you get down to the end of it, even though that they were at one point all the way up at 20, by the time the game was over, because of the cards, I still only had 3 white resources wasted at the border.
And still
They had a
dumping them
huge
over.
bunch, and they had a bunch more resources than I did on the border, and I still won the game. So I think, on multiple playthroughs, I think that you got to re-examine. I take some time to re-examine these cards and how they interact with, and how they disincentivize the border here, and then B, how your mechanics are
Pigeonholing.
are
There's
yeah
only
are
one way to win the game,
right.
And the fact that there are alternate win cons, the fact that the central government is even there, is an invitation. The fact that the wall is there is an invitation. You've got these 3 main zones here, and they should either be avenues to victory or not look like they're avenues to victory. Because I think we can summarize as like we basically felt tricked. I was tricked into thinking that if I went wild pony, I could possibly win with the central government. We were all tricked into thinking that the teamwork would work. We were tricked into thinking the wall would work, and basically, because we had like just a couple turns, like 2 or 3 different actions of less than perfect teamwork. That's why we lost.
Right, why
And
was
there's
able
no
to win
coming
the
back
Yeah,
from that
I
ever.
mean, another thing you can do is end the game when the last color puts their stuff in. Then there's one more turn after that, then the game ends. And because why do all of the white pieces get to move over? Why do they get
Right.
like 5 additional turns to figure out, okay, let's just see. Let me
Right.
just put, okay, 2 more over here. Oh, nothing happens. Let's draw a card. Let's see what random thing happens. Okay, I don't have any control. Let's move on. Okay, put 2 more in. And just kind of like wait. I was just waiting to lose.
Yeah, that end game
So
where they
you-
were both drawing, but I was still.
If you
Yeah,
made it
that
more
was weird.
competitive and had the white not have that so many turns after we had ran out of resources, because
Right.
I felt out of control of the game at that point. I felt like the math was there, game over.
Right.
You can already see
It
at
is
that point.
right,
So
and it is pretty
just
solvable.
end the game sooner, maybe,
Yeah.
and that could also fix the game.
Because every time you're going to go through, you're going to play out all the pieces. You're going to go through all the cards. You're going to, the game is made to play so you do everything every time, which just makes it solvable. It makes it so you can figure out, okay, there's definitely a best way to play this because the same thing's going to happen more or less every time. They might have the cards come over in a different order, but all of them generally seem to come across. Maybe there's a handful that you miss. So yeah, I think that making it a little shorter, maybe making it so white could win with having 4, and making the game just a little bit shorter, and not making it guaranteed that white's going to play out all of their resources, could help as well. So I think you're still like. I think you're onto something. I think you're definitely like very close, but to having a game that handles this in a in kind of a good bipartisan manner that's trying to teach like teamwork and people getting along and stuff like that.
On that note, on the themes of the game, this is kind of out of left field because I know that sort of the reason the game exists is the flavor and what it's about. It's about immigration. But like when I look at the mechanics, when I look at the bones of this game, and imagine sort of the finished product that Wolf was just talking about, I can see this being a game of like wildly different flavor. I would love to see, like up top here is a space station, and down here is a horde of aliens, literal extraterrestrials, I suppose I should say.
Because with some of the flavor on the cards too, you might lose half of your audience that you're trying to reach.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very intense topic for a board game, and I'm not telling you don't do that. Like we said, it's doing what you want it to do.
It's politicized, so some people are going to like this and some people aren't.
Well, but yeah, I mean, it is clearly.
It's
I don't think you have to tell them it's a political game.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, yeah.
It's doing what it's meant to do. Or well, I mean, we kind of discussed how mechanically
Right.
it wasn't.
I think honestly, like, that it doesn't, like, either way, this game kind of mechanically makes an argument that neither side would like.
Yeah.
It does make an argument that says
The
all
premise of the
immigrants
game,
are
yeah.
bad, and it also makes an argument that spending any money on border security or dedicating resources to border security is also a waste.
The premise is writing checks that the mechanics can't cash.
Right. Or it's just it doesn't seem like as you play it more, it seems to kind of lose its, like, unless the point of your game is that, but the stated is that borders are important, but your mechanics make it so borders aren't important. And then your stated thing is that you're trying to just prevent illegal immigration, but in this game, all immigration is illegal. So yeah, there's definitely some, like, on further review, like just some questions that come up with, what exactly are you trying to say? Or is it just like putting it out there and let people figure it out for themselves? So, but yeah, the way to win and the way to victory in a game like this definitely says
Matters.
something. It matters. How you win this game matters. And if how you win this game is the message that you're sending. And right now, that message that these mechanics sends is focus on this stuff. Ignore central government, ignore the border, focus on just keeping the country happy, and then as many immigrants can come across as they like, but basically what it says is if, red and blue work together on the economy, it'll be plenty strong enough to accommodate as many immigrants that want to come across. And that kind of makes the argument against sovereignty. So I do think, all these mechanics are very cool. And like Drew was saying, if you wanted to retheme it, if you're in love with the mechanics and this is just the theme you thought would work best for it,
I just was saying that's a compliment
but if you
the
wanted
mechanics.
to, if you wanted to retheme it, you could and use these mechanics on something else. But if your goal here is to make a statement, if your goal is just to make people think, I guess you've done that. I thought about it. I definitely thought this game was saying one thing, and then I played it a couple times, and now appears to be saying something different, and it's definitely gotten me to think. So if your goal is to just get people to think, then you're good. But if you have a specific message or a specific thing that you're trying to get across, make sure that doing that is the best way to win this game. And so right now, just from reading everything that you have here, I don't think that your message is ignore the border and just focus on education and everything will be fine. But that's what I got from this second playthrough. I think you still have a solid foundation here for a good game. You just need to take some passes and make sure that the mechanics and the way that plays out are saying what you want to say. But thanks for sending us the game, and keep up the good work.